The movie starts when a man named Andy waved at some people he wanted to greet them, but they stayed quiet instead. The strangers didn't wave back. Instead, they pulled out a gun. In this world full of zombies, people fear each other more than the dead. Only a few humans are left now, and no one trusts anyone. Andy and his family have lived on a boat for 2.5 months. The boat keeps them safe from zombies, but food is running out fast. One day, Andy saw an empty yacht drifting nearby. Hoping for supplies, he rowed over to take a look. To stay safe, he used a mirror to check the cabin inside. Nothing moved. Everything looked quiet. He climbed aboard and found food, boxes of it. It was enough to keep them alive for several more months. He smiled for the first time in weeks and headed back with a box, but behind him something made a sudden sound. Andy paused for a second, then kept walking. He didn't think it was anything serious. But while he slept that night, something terrible happened. Kay had heard about the food and wanted to help. She didn't wake Andy. She just wanted to surprise him. Quietly, she took the boat and went to the yacht alone. She searched the cabin, hoping to find a razor for him. Then she heard a strange noise behind her. She turned to run, but it was already too late. Back on the boat, Andy was woken by his daughter's cry. He held her close and walked out to look for Kay. That's when he saw it, blood on the floor. His heart sank. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. Andy opened the bathroom door and saw Kay quietly wrapping her bleeding arm. He rushed to her side, confused and scared, but she didn't say a word, just looked at him with tired eyes. Then Kay slowly pulled out a small bracelet and handed it to Andy. It was a countdown tracker. 48 hours until she turned. A zombie had bitten her. Andy froze. His world crashed around him, but instead of panicking, he grabbed a bag and began to pack. He remembered the government map showing help stations on land. Maybe there was still hope. Maybe they could still save her. Without waiting, the family left the boat and headed for shore. But land was more dangerous than they expected. Every step had to be careful. Every sound mattered. Thankfully, they found a car near the edge of a small road. Andy filled the tank while Kay kept watch. That's when she spotted a zombie in the distance. She didn't shout, afraid to draw more of them. Instead, she flicked the turn signal. Andy saw it and understood right away. Just before the zombie reached him, Andy jumped back into the car. He floored the gas and sped away. But Kay noticed something awful. Her wounds were soaked in zombie blood. That meant the change was starting, and fast. Tears filled her eyes. She quietly opened the door, ready to leave. She didn't want to hurt her family. Andy slammed the brakes and chased after her. She begged him to let her go. She knew the truth. She knew her time was almost up, but Andy couldn't give up. Not yet. He pulled her close and helped her back into the car. To stop her from running again, he broke the inside door handle. They kept driving, holding on to hope. But the road had more pain waiting. A zombie suddenly ran into the street. Andy swerved. The car spun out of control. It crashed, hard. Kay was thrown forward. A tree branch pierced her stomach. Andy hit his head and blacked out. When he woke, the world was quiet. He looked at the car door and saw one word written in blood. Then he saw Kay, her face covered in blood. Her eyes, not human anymore. She had turned. Andy reached for his crying daughter, trying to calm her down. But in that moment, his wife, now a zombie, bit his shoulder. Shaking with pain and grief, he carried his daughter out of the car. Then he turned back. He had to face what was left of his wife. He picked up a weapon and ended her suffering with trembling hands. Afterward, he sat beside the car, crying out in pain and heartbreak. He wanted to give up. But then he looked at his baby girl. She was all he had left, so he removed the countdown bracelet from Kay's arm and wore it himself. He reset the timer. 48 hours until his own change. Andy knew what he had to do. He had to find someone to protect her before it was too late. With his daughter on his back, he set off once more. She kept crying as they walked. Andy sprayed Kay's perfume in the air. Smelling her mother's scent, the baby calmed down at last. But suddenly, Andy spotted the zombie that caused their crash. He raised a branch, ready to strike. Then someone stopped him. A girl named Thumi appeared from the shadows. She cut her palm with a stone, and the zombie followed her scent. She was using blood to lead the zombie, keeping it close, not killing it. It was her way of staying near someone she had loved. Andy didn't understand, but he kept moving forward. Following the map, he walked through the night. At last he reached the aid station, or what was left of it. The place was dark, cold, and silent. He feared he was too late. Then he saw someone, an older woman named Etta, sitting alone in the corner. She saw the bite on his arm and gently wrapped it with a bandage. Etta told him the truth. This place wasn't a safe zone anymore. The government had abandoned it after the virus spread too fast. Andy asked if she could care for his daughter, but then Etta removed her wig. She was sick too, slowly dying. Andy knew she wouldn't last long. The next morning, he thanked her and left once again. With his daughter strapped to his back, he walked through a silent graveyard. Zombies knelt in the dirt, faces buried, completely still. But if disturbed, they woke. He walked carefully, quietly. Then he saw something a truck parked ahead. Andy moved closer to check if it still worked. Suddenly, someone shouted. It was Vic, trapped in a pit nearby. Zombies were closing in. Gunshots rang out, drawing more of them toward the sound. Vic threw Andy the keys. Andy jumped into the truck, started the engine, and hit the gas. He rescued Vic just in time. But the danger was far from over. Vic took Andy to a small gas station where he said he lived with his wife. At first glance, they looked like a happy couple. Vic handed Lorraine a necklace he found earlier. She took it without a smile, then threw it aside when Vic looked away. Andy noticed but didn't ask questions. Tired and confused, he sat down to rest for a while. Soon, Vic invited Andy to come outside and walk around. Andy had no choice but to leave his daughter with Lorraine. What he didn't expect was a lesson in shooting. Vic gave him a gun and told him to practice. Ahead of them, a group of zombies surrounded a cage. Something inside was drawing their attention. Andy aimed and fired, killing each zombie with Vic's help. But when they got closer, Andy froze. Inside the cage was Thumi, the same girl he met before. He realized what was happening. This wasn't survival. It was cruelty. Vic had locked up a living girl just to lure zombies. Andy had once hoped he could trust them. But not anymore. Back at the station, Lorraine was gently caring for Andy's baby daughter. She noticed the bloodstains on the baby's clothes. She quietly understood the truth. Andy had been bitten. But she said nothing. Instead, she washed the blood out and hung the clothes to dry. When Andy returned, he saw it all, and he realized Lorraine knew. But she didn't judge him. She helped. She wasn't like Vic. In that moment, Andy felt he might be able to trust her. Time was running out. That night, Andy finally made his decision. He kissed his daughter goodbye and stepped outside alone. He carried the government's euthanasia needle, ready to end it himself. But just before he used it, Lorraine appeared. She was holding his daughter in her arms. She looked at Andy with quiet understanding. She knew what he was planning and why. Andy begged her to take care of the baby. But Lorraine shook her head. She told him the truth. She and Vic weren't a couple. Vic had murdered her real husband. She was only surviving, not living. If you love your daughter, she said, take her away from here. Just as he spoke this aloud, Vic appeared behind him like a shadow. With no warning, Vic struck him hard on the head. Everything went dark. When Andy woke up, he was locked in a cage beside Thumi. His vision was blurry, his pulse slower. He didn't have much time. The virus was taking hold. and the sound of groaning zombies was growing closer. Andy looked up and saw a string of fat sausages hanging nearby. An idea sparked. He tied them to a rope and tossed them out in front. The zombies chased the bait, fighting over the meat. In the chaos, one of them slammed into the cage door. Click! It swung open. Andy and Thumi slipped out and crept back to the gas station. Inside, Lorraine was asleep. Andy gently shook her awake and whispered, "We're leaving." He scooped up his baby girl and turned toward the door. Vic was still snoring like a beast. But just as they reached the car, Vic burst out holding a shotgun. Lorraine stepped between them, trying to stop him. He didn't hesitate. He pulled the trigger. She collapsed, blood on her hands. Andy had no choice. He grabbed Thumi and ran for cover. They sprinted into the night and found a narrow cave. They slipped inside just before Vic could shoot again. His voice echoed through the darkness, shouting their names in rage. They stayed quiet, barely breathing, as Vic's footsteps faded away. They waited through the night in silence. But sometime later, Thumi heard something strange. She opened her eyes and saw Andy hunched near the wall. He was licking blood off the cold stone. His body trembled. His eyes were different. The virus was winning. But by dawn, Andy returned to himself. They set out again, Andy, Thumi, and the baby girl. As they walked through the forest, Thumi suddenly stopped beneath a tree. It was her father's resting place, her real father now gone. Her tribe had killed him and buried him here. She placed her hand on the dirt, whispered a soft prayer. Then she stood up and they continued walking. But Andy could feel it now. Something inside was breaking. He checked the countdown. 9 hours left. Time was almost up. After hours of walking, Andy collapsed to the ground and lost consciousness. Thumi gently picked up the baby and waited beside him. When Andy finally woke, weak and pale, he stood up again. He didn't stop. He kept walking toward the family by the river. But when he arrived, his heart dropped. The man was digging graves, 3 of them. Andy rushed over and saw the truth. A zombie had bitten the man too. He was preparing for the end. Andy hoped to entrust his baby to them. But that hope was gone. The man looked at Andy with tired eyes. He handed over a pistol. "Take her far from this place," he said. "Then I'll leave you 2 bullets." Andy nodded in silence and walked away. Behind him, 2 sharp gunshots cracked through the forest. He knew what had happened. The man had ended the pain for himself and his family. Andy found the pistol and sat motionless, gripping it tight. Tears welled up in his eyes. He raised the gun to his head, ready to say goodbye. But then, "Dad." The soft cry of his daughter pulled him back. He lowered the gun. Thumi placed the baby gently in his arms. She looked at him and said, "My tribe is nearby. If we go now, we can reach them soon." Hope, fragile but real, flickered in Andy's chest. If his daughter could grow up with the tribe, maybe she'd be safe. Andy nodded. "Let's go." They crossed forests and valleys until they reached a dark cave. Inside, dozens of zombies were still, lying against walls and floors. "Don't wake them," Thumi whispered. "They sleep in darkness, like the ones buried in earth." Step by step, they moved through the shadows. They were just near the exit when Andy froze. Vic was there. He stood in the light, moving slowly, sniffing the air like a predator. Andy's heart pounded. He turned to Thumi and handed her the baby. "Hide," he said. Then Andy climbed into the back of a van and yelled, "Vic!" His voice echoed bodies, searching for Andy. Andy aimed from the shadows and pulled the trigger. The bullet struck, but not enough. Vic turned and attacked, slamming Andy to the ground. Dizzy, barely breathing, Andy looked up. Vic was walking to the car. He dragged Thumi out and hit her hard. Then he reached in and picked up Andy's baby daughter. Andy's vision blurred, but he stood again, bloodied, broken, but burning with a father's strength. He walked toward Vic, one last time. It turns out Vic had been badly wounded by Andy's earlier shot. He was dying. In his final moments, Vic did something unexpected. He chose to show mercy. He gently set the baby down and backed away, breathing heavily. Then collapsed. Thumi, though bruised and dazed, was alive. She staggered to her feet, holding her aching head. Andy, however, was slipping fast. He walked a little farther, clutching his daughter tightly. But the infection had spread too far. He stopped, trembling, then placed his daughter gently on the ground. A few steps later, he collapsed, his face twisted in pain, blood running from his mouth. He stood up again, but something had changed. Zombie blood now covered his face, and his eyes burned with hunger. He tried to stay awake. He wiped his face again and again, trying to fight the urge. Even the smell of rotting meat tempted him. But Andy wasn't ready to give up. He picked up a piece of carrion, held it, and turned to Thumi. "I have a plan," he whispered. With her help, he tied the meat to a stick, a guiding lure. Then he tied a brace around his mouth and bound his hands tight. He kissed his daughter one last time. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Then he placed her in the baby carrier on his back. As the infection consumed him, Andy changed. He was no longer himself. He was now a zombie. But even then, he kept walking. Driven by love. Drawn forward by the scent of carrion. His broken body carried her step by step. Far ahead, the tribe was preparing to leave. They had just cleared a path, ready to move. Then they heard something. The distant cry of a baby. They turned, and through the soft rising mist, they saw something impossible. A zombie, mouth braced shut, hands bound, carrying a baby on its back, following a stick of rotting flesh. The tribe froze, stunned, but Thumi stepped forward, tears in her eyes. She knew Andy, even as a monster, had kept his promise. He brought his daughter home. The tribesmen approached carefully. They took the baby. They ended Andy's suffering with a final, merciful blow. Later, they buried him beneath the sacred tree. The baby was loved by the people. They noticed something strange written on the baby's stomach. "Thank you."